trying to find my way through the chaos of life, but it feels like I'm drowning in stress and strife, searching for answers, a glimmer of hope in this world of confusion. I'm learning to cope. Sound of sanity, a beacon of light, guiding me through the darkest of nights with wisdom and grace and a message of peace. I find my way back to a state of release. There's a voice in the distance calling my name with a message of comfort and a way to change. I listen closely and I start to see a path to a better, a more peaceful me. Sound of sanity, a beacon of light, guiding me through the darkest of nights with wisdom and grace and a message of peace. I find my way back to a state of release. With each episode, I grow stronger. With each lesson, I last longer. In the sound of sanity, I find my way to a brighter tomorrow and a brand new day. Multiple people asked that our intro be written by ChatGPT, and so
there it is.
You have your wish.
Awesome.
You have your wish.
That's pretty great.
If you want us to start doing that every week, we can, but we won't because you don't.
That's pretty amazing.
So join me on this journey and let's find our way. Together we'll discover a brighter, saner day. With the sound of sanity and a voice of reason, we'll find peace and clarity in this world of treason. I feel like maybe a robot wrote that last part. I don't know. Welcome to Sound of Sanity. This is the podcast where we bring biblical wisdom to an insane world. We're all about applied theology, the Bible, wisdom. We're a wisdom podcast. I think that's true. And we are Nathan Alberson, your humble and obedient host. We are Ben Sulzer, your preacher who's a teacher of sanity.
We are Ben Sulzer.
We are Ben Sulzer.
We are.
That was fun.
That was fun.
Hello, Jake.
Hey.
This is Sound of Sanity. This is a podcast where we talk about biblical sanity. And this is our crowdsourced episode, another one of our crowdsourced, fan-sourced episodes. This one called February in 1984, where we talk about things from the news, about the culture, about what's going on in the world at large. And we talk about whatever our fans on Discord tell us to talk about. We have a channel on Discord, which you can get to by going to patreon.com/Sound of Sanity. After you've rated and reviewed and subscribed to the podcast, of course. You go there, patreon.com/Sound of Sanity. You sign up, you get instant access to our Discord. You get to talk to a great community of people, and you get to tell us what you want us to podcast about. And so people have done that, and we are going to now talk about those things. And this is, we call it February in 1984 because it's a bunch of dystopian garbage that happened during the month of February, or at least was reported to us during the month. Or no. Sorry. During the month of January. Yeah, see, I have my doubts about the goodness of our titling system, but I have never come up with a better one. So maybe what I should have is my doubts about my own intelligent ability to interact with said system. And it's more my fault than the system's. But in any case, this is stuff that people dropped in there during January, but now it's February, so we're talking about it. So, in any case, here we go into February 1984. What is the first article that our patrons want us to talk about?
Daily Mail article that says, the title is, "It's the most rewarding work we've ever done." Canadian doctor who's euthanized 400 people proudly shares how she's helped kill a man deemed incapable of choosing assisted suicide. As another physician says, he's helped 300 die.
Right. There's a doctor in there, that article, that euthanized 400 people, and a doctor that euthanized 300, and they're both talking about
how rewarding the work is. And the other thing that's, she killed a man deemed incapable of choosing assisted suicide. Right. So there was some criteria where a board determined that if this man had his capacity, he would choose euthanasia, and therefore let's just kill him.
Pretty evil stuff. I liked it back when assisted suicide was called homicide. I thought that was a good name for it.
Man.
Like Jeffrey Dahmer, what a great assistant suicide guy.
Well, you also have Dr.
Kevorkian.
Kevorkian is an amazing name.
It is an amazing bad guy.
For a murderer.
Yep. Not Ben. He was an assistant suicider.
I had forgotten that that it has this whole acronym. MAID, Medical Assistance in Dying. I just forgot that.
Yep.
Medical assistance in dying.
It's really amazing.
Be like if I burned.
It is straight
Orwellian.
1984.
Yeah.
It is so incredibly Orwellian. It's that hideous strike. That's all of those things.
Hey, did you guys hear about the assistant downsizing I did for Jake? I burned down his house. I'm an assistant downsizer now. It's my new job.
That's amazing.
The board decided that Jake needed to be downsized, so we set his house on fire.
He was incapable of making that decision for himself.
Somehow he was.
But we could make it.
We could make him for it.
Well, Jake needs to reduce his carbon footprint.
Right.
It's going to be rewarding work for us to reduce Jake's carbon footprint.
By
Some
turning
of the most rewarding work we've ever done.
all his stuff into carbon. My goodness, assisted suicide. What a bunch of Orwellian doublespeak.
So evil.
Garbage. No, I really want to go through and write a book about Jack the Ripper and like Jeffrey Dahmer and all those guys and be like, they were great at assistants. Like, I think these young ladies need to have some assistant suicide. Is there anything else you want to say about that?
No, there's nothing else to say. It's demonic. What else can you say?
It's demonic,
about
it's evil,
something
and
evil?
it's hilarious how much Canada fits the stereotype of not the dystopian movies where it's like a big screen with an evil guy talking as you walk through an urban sort of hellhole, like Blade Runner type stuff, but more like the Logan's Run style. Everyone's happy. Everybody just talks like this, eh? And we're so happy to be here and cheerful and stuff. But they're cheerfully doing horrible things. It's more that style of dystopia.
And being exterminated, being forcibly like euthanized.
Well, yeah, it's
Logan's Run.
Yeah,
Which is not a movie to recommend, I guess.
What is it?
Logan's Run.
Logan's Run. Yeah, well, it's weird how those dopey things from the 70s now feel prophetic. Logan's Run, Soylent Green.
It just came up in my Instagram feed yesterday, an old Wired article from 2017 about cannibalism and what's wrong with it. What's the big deal?
Right. Like the author was like asking the question, what's the big deal?
The article was, let me just grab that real quick because it's not in our Discord, but it's just worth mentioning that that's a thing that is real.
Sure.
I think I just found it. There's
what's wrong with eating people
from Wired UK. Then there's one called The Case for Cannibalism. I don't know if that's true. Anyway.
Well, it's probably worth talking about that more generally for a second because cannibalism has really hit the zeitgeist lately. There's been 4 or 5 big cannibal movies and cannibal love stories.
Anytime that sort of thing happens, it's like you have to know whether it's intentional or not. And we talk about this all the time and generally fall on the side of it's not intentional. It's not like some part of like
some evil cabal in Hollywood is.
But it is in the air.
Right.
And it may be demonically intentional. It's part of a program that's being run.
Right. Well, and even if you wanted to take a step back, which I don't think you necessarily should, but if you wanted to say, we're not actually going to eat each other, if you wanted to say that, then what you would have to say is we are obsessed with the idea of eating each other, with the idea of devouring each other on some level. And we want to process the fact that we all feel like we are devouring or being devoured. And this is how we see our lives, especially if we're angsty teenagers that buy movie tickets. And we're desensitized enough that vampire dramas don't do it for us anymore. About 20 years ago, you had, well, maybe it is 20 years ago now, you had True Blood, you had 90s and early aughties was a big time for vampires. And then this used to go in cycles. In the 80s, you had Anne Rice, and that was just homoerotic kind of, that was about AIDS and gay stuff, basically. And then it came back around in the late 90s and early aughties, and you had all this vampire stuff. And I don't know that we're going to get another vampire cycle because vampires are just too silly. They wear capes, they sleep in coffins. It's not visceral enough to actually
the
help
cycle
us.
usually is or at least as I understood, it was always vampire, zombie, vampire, zombie, vampire, zombie.
Right, and we're kind of
zombies are
coming back.
HBO just launched a big new zombie show that is their new thing, the new HBO show that's taken the world by storm.
Yeah, I mean, zombies have kind of been a perennial. They've never really gone away since The Walking Dead and all that stuff. You had your big 70s, George Romero, Night of the Living Dead kind of stuff hit, and then it went away for a while. But the newer wave of zombies,
it's been a little bit more steady stream.
It's been a little bit more steady, but also it's had its peaks and valleys, and we're headed into a peak right now. But vampire, to me, the ultimate monster is a vampire. It's a much more interesting monster than a zombie, because a vampire is somebody that you meet every day. You meet predators, people with malicious intent who have been corrupted by other people and wish to corrupt you, and that could be a sexual abuser, but it could also just be a spiritual abuser, or there's all kinds of vampires in the world. Be a little more hard pressed to say exactly who the zombies are. I mean, I guess the Democrats, whatever. But there's a reason we love zombies. And
it's a mass hysteria consumption.
Right. Twitter. Sure. And also sort of bodily stuff that we're scared of, AIDS, things like that. Of course, zombieism touches on that. Zombieism touches on our desire to retreat into a bunker and get away from the world and treat everyone else as the enemy and just shoot them in the head because they've been compromised somehow in a way that makes them inhuman. So there's a lot we can talk about with zombies, but the fact is, if I meet somebody at the grocery store, I'm not thinking usually that guy's a zombie. Whereas you walk past vampires every day, and you've been hurt by vampires probably.
Every time you log on to social media, you might think
you're swarmed by them.
You're swarmed by zombies.
You're swarmed by zombies, yeah. And then you're like, ooh, that guy's a vampire. So I think vampirism is one of the most potent metaphors, but unfortunately, it's just been so sucked of blood by the culture that it's hard for us to do it well these days in a way that really feels visceral. And probably somebody will crack the code, and then we'll have another vampire cycle. But I think Cannibals are just that's what it is. I think it's just the vampire cycle.
Well, that's where the zombies and the vampires meet, right?
Yeah.
Is like, because I remember reading the Walking Dead comic graphic novel series
for
a while until I was done, because I remember it was fun. It was fun for a while, and then it was just like, okay, now we're going into serial killing and even more sexual depravity, and it was just like, wait a minute, he's never going to stop. There's no hero. That's not his interest.
Right.
He's just going to push until all the people are zombies. And maybe that's an obvious thing to say if you've seen a zombie movie. That's like the whole point. But still,
right.
It's like, then the good guy's going to become a predator too. Can't stop it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he'll be the one. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just feel like it's I would almost say it's the vulgarization of our culture. It's the crassness of our culture. It's the your face wickedness of our culture. It's the same thing with abortion. You used to have to say, we want abortion to be safe, legal, and rare. More and more people are saying, we know it kills babies.
And we just want to kill the babies.
And so it's like cannibalism strips away one layer of metaphor from vampirism. Vampirism, it's like we all know what a vampire is. We all know it's sexual. We all know these things. But there's something there is a little bit of a modesty veil. Actually, that's actually why I think it's a potent metaphor that can be good when used well, because it actually does draw a little bit of a modesty veil around these things so that you can talk about them. That's actually, in a weird way, old school horror was a way of drawing a modesty veil around certain things, even though in another sense it's shoving them in our faces, shoving them in our noses. But cannibalism is so much more just like, hey, you realize you're eating somebody. You're not like coming in the night and drinking their blood and leaning over them with a cape. You're just ripping their...
No theatrics here.
There are no theatrics here. Actually, what you desire to do is to consume the people that you love, or the people that you're married to, or the people that are your children. You just want to eat them, and we're not even going to pretend like that's not a thing that we're all into.
And that's the thing about this Wired article is it is literally talking about your loved ones, right? Like, so part of what the article talks about is like lab grown bits of your loved ones or celebrities. So like synthesized cannibalism as a part of this. So how do I, like, if I fetishize the idea of eating and consuming my loved ones or a particular celebrity crush or obsession, can I literally do a synthesized version of that? Like, it's just like that level of,
like Brad Pitt gives his DNA to some lab and then they sell,
and then they grow
Brad Pitt
steaks.
I can't even. I mean,
exactly. That's exactly the kind of thing that they're talking about.
I don't know.
And so it's like in vitro meat, but you would just be able to,
which is obviously totally sick.
Yeah, and it goes actually along with something else that but it just hit me on.
Oh, I bet I know what you're going to say.
On Twitter too, the
people that give themselves to be baby incubators after they're dead or after they're brain dead.
Yeah, it seems this whole, like, this is from like a scholarly article,
like a bioethics journal or something like that.
Yeah, and here's a direct quote. It seems plausible that some people would be prepared to consider donating their whole bodies for gestational purposes, just as some people donate parts of their bodies for organ donation. We already know that pregnancies can be successfully carried to term in brain-dead women. There's no obvious medical reason why initiating such pregnancies would not be possible. In this paper, ... This is not parody. This is talking about using the bodies of the dead or the bodies of the brain dead to incubate children in our sci-fi horror drama.
Right.
Well, the horror movies are true. I mean, our society just wants to open the portal to hell and say, you know that you want to look inside.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you want to go down there. Just come on. Like, stop pretending that you don't.
Yeah, I think that's true. I also think it's true that we have a society that's built on the bodies of little ones, and we have this collective guilt that we have to deal with, and
you have to lean into it.
We've got so much blood guilt accumulated at this point that the only way to deal with it is not just to ignore it, but to say, actually, it's great. Actually, it's good. Actually, this is something that is lovely, and so. Yeah. I wouldn't feel so sick about. I mean, I would feel sick about that journal entry no matter what. But the fact that the thing that really makes it you feel queasy about it is that it's presented as a beautiful thing, actually, that you could give your body to be a gestating pod, or that you could give your body for somebody to eat. And many of these most recent spate of kind of indie cannibal dramas have been that. The idea that I love somebody so much that I want to have them be part of me, or that I want myself to be part of them. Mm-hmm. And that's just really old school paganism. You read about the Mayans and stuff like that. It's like, they're not just abusing their enemies. They have a certain respect for their enemies. They want to consume their best qualities. They want to make their energy part of their energy. It's like, this is just always what people have done. It's really dark stuff. It's really demonic stuff, but it's not new. We didn't just come up with a new form of evil. There's nothing new under the sun.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know we were going to talk about this today. Anything else you guys want to say about cannibalism?
Nope.
Oh man, no.
But going along with it, speaking of the demonic, the next thing in our feed is an article. It's actually a good article. Mm-hmm. It's a Rod Dreher article in the American Conservative that was sent to me. So I posted it, but it was sent to me outside of Discord. It's called Temptation of the Psychonauts, and it's worth reading.
Yep.
Because you have to know, if you don't know that this is true, it was actually sent to me by a pastor who's dealing with this sort of thing in his church. Magic mushrooms, DMT, psilocybin, ayahuasca. This is the new frontier of what we will be dealing with in our churches, these sort of trips that people go on, the use of psychedelic drugs to get some kind of mystical or transcendent experience. It is exploding. And if you don't pay attention, Joe Rogan has been promoting this sort of thing. We're having people on his show, at least, that promote it. Definitely, even in very conservative quarters, people have promoted this off and on. Scott Adams talks about the use of psychedelics. There was a time when Mike Cernovich was promoting ayahuasca. He doesn't anymore since he's converted to Orthodoxy and sees it as demonic. But there was a time, it's just very trendy and hip. And there's also a new frontier of medicine exploring or coming back around to the psychedelic experiments of the 60s and the CIA stuff. But trying to find, can we microdose this stuff? Can we use it to heal certain psychological or psychiatric disorders? Can we help people overcome PTSD? Can we deal with stress related? Can we heal people using this stuff?
Can someone take one dose and then be done with trauma? Can they just reframe their brain? Can they be done with addiction? Can they be done with cigarettes? Is there a way to?
And there are many people out there that anecdotally claim this is exactly what happened to them or for them. And part of why this pastor sent me this article is he was telling me about how there's somebody in his church that he knows one person who went down this road and ended up killing himself. And he knows another person in his church who claims this was the most helpful, beneficial experience of his life. I hope I'm getting that right. Maybe not. Maybe that's a bit of an overstatement on my part or an exaggeration, but that's kind of how I remember the conversation going. So,
but we're going to get that. That's the gist of what we're going to get.
Yep.
And and I would say the people aren't going to be wrong. There are going to be people who say, I used it for such and such an end, and I achieved such and such an end. And I think the worst thing you could do, or maybe not the worst thing you could do, but one of the bad things you could do is say, well, no, actually, it didn't work. Because, of course, these things work.
And so part of the deal here is you can find academic papers, you can find things from Johns Hopkins, from all kinds of places that talk about, I'll read a bit from this article right here. So Dreyer is going to link to an article from the New Republic. And then he says this, DMT enthusiasts who view their use of the drug not as his recent story about DMT enthusiasts who view their use of the drug not as recreational, but as exploratory. They do believe that the drug unlocks the door to a different dimension of reality. That is not to a hallucinatory realm of the imagination, and they want to explore it. Here's an excerpt. This is him quoting New Republic. Thorbon is one of the first in a class of so-called psychonauts exploring new frontiers in hallucinogenic research, preparing to use a technology called extended state DMT. When the drug is smoked, the trip lasts minutes, despite feeling much longer, but with the constant stream of DMT supplied to user and blood serum levels of the molecule regulated, that trip can last hours or even days, seemingly an eternity. The method might give Thorbon and other psychonauts enough time to bring back detailed trip reports of their experience. An intriguing aspect of DMT experiences is a degree of similarity. The landscapes and beings can be recognizable to different users. A mechanical elf is a popular recurring visitor. And for Thorbon, the trip seemed more real than real, quote unquote, a quote heard often in DMT experimenting circles. Advocates of extended state programs want to know whether these experiences illuminate a new corner of the mind, even another dimension, or whether users are just getting really high. So here's one of the things that you'll find. You can find these sort of like double-blind experiments done at Johns Hopkins, just gathered research, where people are experiencing entities in these trips that are, it doesn't matter, they can be across cultures, they can be on different continents, they can be from different decades, but they experience the same kind of entities who say the same kinds of things and present themselves in the same way and have the same appearance. They can draw these pictures, and it's not unlike the gray men alien type.
Right, or the sleep paralysis men that come into your room.
Right.
There's all kinds of stuff like that.
Yeah, and so, these are beings. The idea that these are we're tapping into another dimension and encountering interdimensional beings, mechanical elves or aliens, interdimensional aliens, that sort of thing is how these people think of this sort of thing, or the questions that they're trying to ask. And it's just straight up demonic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Dreyer does a good job of just kind of explaining this whole world and opening you up to understand it. There's even in this article a little video of Graham Hancock, our boy.
Yep.
Talking about this sort of thing. But yeah.
I just think it's one of those things where it's like, sure. Yeah. I think it probably does work, but the secret things belong to the Lord. He has not ordained that we're to look into that stuff. So I don't feel any great need to push back and say, well, it's probably just imagination. It's probably just X, Y, or Z, the ways that people might diminish it all down to just being a chemical reaction.
No. And if you talk with Christians in African cult, like on the Christian frontier, where you still have voodoo and witch doctors and stuff. You hear stuff about interactions with entities, and I can think of a missionary who just...
If you're going to do an ayahuasca trip, the way to do it is to have a witch doctor who is guiding you on a spiritual journey, and he sees you as interacting with gods. And
right. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm reminded of, it's probably an orthodoxy. It sounds like it's an orthodoxy. G.K. Chesterton talking about how people are so mad that they can't fornicate, that they can't have homosexual sex, but he is so happy that he gets to be married to one woman. That's enough glory and mystery and joy and for him.
Well, he has a whole bit about the romance of choice.
Right.
Right. The romance of limitation, the romance of having made a commitment, made a decision, and then this is the one woman.
Right.
That I will know, and nobody else gets to know her.
Yeah, and the reality of life is you will know more about the secrets of pleasure by giving yourself to one woman than you will by exploring the great frontiers of the Kama Sutra or whatever the new Kama Sutra is. And I think that's analogous to this. We live in a world of gods and monsters. We live in a world of heaven and hell. We live in a world of angels and demons. We live in a world of good and evil. We live in a world full of the supernatural. It's all around us. We interact with it every day. We just think of it as everyday stuff because we're boring, because we're dissatisfied.
Yeah.
I mean, every time you pray, you are talking to the Almighty God. That's crazy. But you just have lost the romance of it, if you want to call it that. And so if you want to go on a trip, man, read your Bible, read the Psalms. That's where you will find what your soul is looking for when it wants something that's greater than you, when it wants something that's supernatural. That's who God is. And what you will actually find when you give yourself to being a cosmonaut, exploring the frontiers of the supernatural, is that it will elude you, actually.
Well, and it will enslave you.
It will elude, and then it will, the thing that you want will elude you, and the thing that you don't want will enslave you.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember, too, just that Jesus is over the spiritual world. And it is actually a big point in the New Testament that we don't often pay attention to, because the demonic is, at least in my childhood, it's mostly out of our purview, or that's not the right word, but anyway, out of our experience. And so we just don't, it doesn't hit us as viscerally, like, wait a minute, Jesus just says no to the unclean spirits, and they like go into the pigs and drown. He's like, no, they're going over there. And then and we're in Jesus. We don't need some other spiritual power or access. We have access to, like you said, the Almighty through Jesus. We don't need something else.
Well, that's another problem, though, is people will use that kind of language to say, well, of course I can go exploring because I have Jesus.
So I'm safe and protected.
I'm safe and protected.
And I need to escape from this material world and face the reality that we live in a spiritual world. And so I'm just going to go and engage with the spiritual world and spiritual realities so that I come back stronger and better equipped and have a better understanding of these things. That kind of thing can be really, really tempting.
These are the kinds of arguments we're going to get as these people come into our churches.
Well, and you have to understand, and this is one of the things that people have been sort of groomed into giving themselves permission to fully engage the lust of the eyes, unhealthy curiosity about any number of things. And social media does that. It gives you windows into things that you were never meant to see constantly. And so you're constantly, when you're on Facebook and reading about what somebody had for lunch or whatever, who lives in a different state, you're engaging a part of your soul in this consumption of things that are just not a part of the ordinary knowledge you ought to have as you go about the world as God made it, as you go about your life in the world as God made and designed things to work. And so you have this sort of like unhealthy curiosity for forbidden things that's being fed on all sides, in all corners, and pornography feeds into that. A lot of our movies and shows feed into that, where you see gruesome things, that body horror is that kind of thing. It all feeds into this idea that there's nothing off limits. There's no such thing as a modesty veil. There's no place where you draw a line. There's no knowledge that's forbidden. And so then you'll have people with this really unhealthy curiosity about all kinds of things, a desire to experience and to know these sorts of things. And they'll tell themselves the lies that, well, I have the Holy Spirit, I'm in Christ, so I can go into this sort of thing and it's safe for me, and they'll come out harmed.
Yeah. You're just making me think of a movie I had on recently that had nudity in it. I didn't know it was going to happen, and then it happened. And this was the first time where I was like, I wasn't supposed to see this. This woman revealed something private about herself to the audience that was watching the movie, which feels like such an obvious point to make. But it was like, after you've been married and you've actually had the experience of that, it's a little bit different. You watch a sitcom and there's two people laying in bed talking, and they're both in their pajamas, and there's nothing particularly immodest about it. But
it's immodest.
Except that's just what happens in people's bedrooms.
And you're not really supposed to know about that until you have your own bedroom. Am I telling you never to watch? No. But it's just, you have to realize we live in a world that violates, and has since the invention of cinema at the very least, violated so many basic taboos. Boys follow girls into the locker room, into the restroom, into like just basic things that you wouldn't know what that looks like, what that feels like, and you're just used to it. And you kind of think you're owed it in some weird way. Like you think that you should know everything about everything that goes on with everybody. And that's just the world that we live in. And you have to place yourself in that world, realize how strange it is, what a historical anomaly it is. Even the fact that I can turn on a movie and watch and see, oh, that's what India looks like. That's how people live in India. It's like that.
Well, you get that experience without ever having to pay for it. And there's something wonderful about certain aspects of that. You get to watch a beautiful nature documentary and see things about the way God made the world that you would never have been able to see. You get to see things about India. But then there's this whole aspect too of we're so rich and so overwhelmed with riches that we never have to pay for.
Mm-hmm.
And it feeds into this mentality that we're just entitled to whatever we want. It doesn't matter. We're just entitled to it. If I want to see India, I should be able to see India at the drop of a hat. Pull out my phone.
If I want to know what a celebrity sex life is like, or what goes on behind the closed doors of politicians, or
I should know.
If
I want to know if I'm a single, unexperienced young man, I should know things about the female anatomy because I should.
Mm-hmm. And there's so much that you do know that you weren't meant to know.
Without having ever earned it, without having ever worked for it, without having ever paid for it.
Right, and some of that is the difference, right, between images and text. Not all of it, but part of what we're talking about is the way that images deliver things to you for free.
Yeah.
And imprint you and damage you without any possibility of consideration or buffer or processing. Whereas for some of these things, there's a responsible way to do that.
Well, it's pretty fun reading Anna Karenina, which we're doing for the Bookening right now. And it's got this scene where Anna and Vronsky, the adulterers, consummate their affair. And then it's got a little scene between a married couple later on where they're newly married and he comes in and gets distracted from his work. And then they're like doing something on the couch and the maid walks in or something like that. And it's amazing how Tolstoy is able to deliver both of those scenes, give you the feeling of them, the feeling of self-loathing and disgust in the one, and the feeling of kind of happy, erotic joy in the other, and give you nothing. Also, give you no salacious details.
Give you just enough that you use your imagination and you can only fill it in. You can only supply it with what you know.
Right.
Right. And so if you don't know, then you don't know.
It's quite possible that I read Anna Karenina for the first time as a young man without being married and did not actually know what happened between the married couple. And this time I knew exactly what happened, even though he doesn't ever even tell you
anything.
He basically just says the maid walked in and they were embarrassed or something. Like that's the sentence.
Mm-hmm.
And you know exactly
what was going
on, and you picture your own version of what was going on. And it's amazing how the printed word can
if you don't know, it sails right over your head.
Sails right over your head. And I could see a really young person reading the Anna and Vronsky scene and actually not getting the plot point that they've slept together.
That this is the moment they slept together. It's that veiled.
Mm-hmm. And it's not because Tolstoy's being a prude or anything. Like he's just He's just using the written word really effectively because he's one of the greatest users of it ever to do exactly what he wants to do and to pull exactly as much of the curtain.
So easy to supply everything that you need.
Yeah. And that's something that's very hard with images. It's very hard to make a movie about adultery that doesn't draw you into the adultery in a bad way. It's not impossible, but it's much harder than it is actually with a book, because just seeing somebody kiss or whatever it is, seeing somebody hold hands even, has a trigger response.
Seeing a look.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Seeing a woman look attractive and desirable in the wrong way. It's like the men in the audience they can't just respond to the character. They're responding to the actress. They're responding to the way she looks. And that's something that a movie by its design must do, and a book doesn't have to. So
don't watch movies.
Don't watch movies. That's the thing. And
definitely don't listen to our movie podcast.
Yep. And if you ever are watching a sitcom where two people are talking in bed in their pajamas, like Let Lucy and Desi or
Mork and Mindy
or something like that. Yeah.
What?
Mork and Mindy weren't a married couple, were they?
Okay, I have no idea.
That would be naughty.
Okay.
Wow.
If you're watching The Thin
I don't
Man,
remember what Mork and Mindy is about, except an alien. Played by Robin Williams.
Turn it off, burn it all. Psychonauts, don't heed the call. I don't know. If anybody in Evansville wants to see a demon, Amy Grant is playing in town this March.
Wow.
Patreon.com/Sound of Sanity. Until next time.
Whoa, we're going to skip all the rest of these?
Stay sane.